So we had already done the first three slides. We talked about different influences, the different factors affecting the international human resource management, and how it is different from the domestic HRM. Now, today we'll just have a quick look at a very, very interesting framework which has been given by a researcher. His name is Hofstede, and he has identified. I mean, this is a widely, acclaimed framework, and he has given five dimensions of culture. He has divided the world cultures into five categories, and the first category or the first dimension is individualism vis-a-vis collectivism, right? Now, it basically, refers to the we feeling and the I feeling, right? I mean, on one side you have a culture where people, uh, you know, they don't have a high affinity or affiliation uh, for teams or for groups. So this is where you will have individualistic tendencies, and people, they go after the personal glory, the self glorification, and they will pursue, they will try to look at things which can add another feather into their caps. While on the other side, that is collectivism, people have a tendency for groups, for teams, for so as it is mentioned, it describes the strength of the relation between individual and other individuals in the society. So different cultures will find, uh, in some cases you'll find that people are more relationship oriented. So this is where you'll find collectivism, and they will take responsibilities as teams, and they will be happy if it's a win-win situation for all of them, right? And just opposite to this would be the situation or the case with individualism, where people take pride in themselves only, and they generally do things which will bring them glory, which will bring them some kind of recognition and reward, right? Now, the other dimension of this culture is the power distance. Now, this is basically about the element of formality in any organization, in any culture. Greater is the power distance. If it means that the society is more formal, they observe rules, regulations. I mean, if they have to, for example, if they have to uh, meet somebody, so they will take a prior appointment and follow the schedule for appointment, and then meet the people. Whereas in case where the power distance is less, it means that there is very less formality. People can just meet their superiors. They can just enter into the office of the superiors, talk to them at will, without any appointment, without any some kind of pre-information, and it basically means an informal thing. Now, let me recount a very interesting thing. This is from my experience in Oman. Am I audible? आप लोग सुन पा रहे हैं मुझे?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
right. So we had a meeting with the vice chancellor in Dhofar University, and his name was Hassan Kashub. He was a local person from the mountains. You call them as Jabali people, the Jabali people. So his name was Hassan Kashub. He was the vice chancellor, and we had a proper meeting with him. So He was taking the meeting. All of a sudden, he just got up, went out, and then came back after a while. And then, I mean, he was a vice chancellor. He's not answerable before anybody, but he explained that there was a person from his tribe who called up, and he wanted to be dropped back home. When that person had come to see him in the university. So, I mean, this is the kind of situation was. I mean, you just cannot compare this with anywhere else in the world. A vice chancellor who is taking a scheduled meeting with his colleagues in the university, he receives a call, he goes out, makes arrangement for the conveyance of a person from his tribe, right? So, I mean, this just shows that in a society like in Oman, where you have less of power distance, especially among uh, the people belonging to the same tribes. So here, as mentioned, it concerns power distance. It concerns the way the culture deals with the unequal distribution of power and defines the amount of inequality that is normal. And perhaps that is the reason, if we compare this situation with India, why there are so many people who are, lusting after power, whether it is political power or administrative power, because they have seen the deprivation in their lives somewhere, right? And that is why perhaps there's a lot of, still a lot of glamour attached to the civil services. People want to get into the IAS and IPS primarily because of, they want to feel this, they want to feel power, right? So they want to have a taste of power. And I mean, this, believe me, I'm sure some of you will agree with me. Power actually, people like to enjoy power primarily when there is unequal distribution of resources and they are being controlled by fewer hands. So this is wherein they try to derive all the fun from handling power. You don't need power actually if everybody is doing their job to the best of their intentions, to the best of their honesty, right? So you don't actually need power. You need power only when people are not doing their job, which is assigned to them, isn't it? If everybody is while say riding a scooter or driving a car, if they are following the traffic rules 100%, they are carrying their licenses, they are carrying their documents, they are following the speed limits, they are following the red lights and other signals, then why would you ever need a traffic police? You need traffic police because people don't follow the rules. The moment they find that the traffic lights or the cameras at a particular place are not working, you can just see the kind of chaos that is created in that particular area. Do you agree with me?
Yes,
Do you
sir.
have any example about power distance? Yes. Okay, moving further. The third dimension is uncertainty avoidance. Again, this is another cultural trait. In some cases, you find that people believe that what will be will be. What will happen? They are fatalists. They believe 100% in fate. Sometimes they derive it from their religion. Whereas some people, they say that they can control fate, they can predict what is going to happen, and especially with a very sophisticated models based on artificial intelligence and the decision support systems, right? A lot of things are, taking place. So some people believe that future is unpredictable. You just can't, do anything about it. What will happen, what is destined to happen, shall take place. Whereas in some cultures, people believe that they can control the future if they behave in a more systematic way, right? So they will be able to, in a way, have a more control over what is going to happen in the future. Now, a very pertinent example here, I would say, is the current times, the pandemic. There are two schools of thoughts. At least that's what I have come across in my, whatever literature I have seen so far. One of them is those people who believe that this is some kind of a, curse from the skies, from the Almighty, and this is, this has come as a warning for the mankind, and this is something inevitable. This is happening, and this is continue till the time people will, rectify themselves. On the other hand, the more scientific approach is that this is a viral, this is a pandemic created by, it may be, created in the lab, and from where it has spread all over the world. But if you want to control it, you have to follow certain rules. You need to get yourself vaccinated. You need to cover up your face. You need to wear a mask. You need to follow social distancing, and that's how it is, right? Another, now this is a very very interesting dimension. Am I audible? Am I making sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Now comes masculinity and femininity, right? Now, there are certain values which are associated with, the masculine culture. You may say things like achievement, values like power, values like success. So, whereas the cultures which are high on femininity, you'll find that they have, values like affection, care, love. So some of the cultures you will find, if I'm allowed to, quote, like for example, the German culture is considered to be a very very masculine culture, very matter of fact, very very formal. People have very very formal work relationships, right? And whatever, they're more about achieving their targets. They are they want to achieve success in whatever they are doing, in whichever organization they are working. And as against that, if we compare the Indian culture, we find that we are more, you know, oriented towards love. We are more oriented towards care. We care for other people, right? We have that group feeling. We are a more collectivist society, right? We are not concerned just about ourselves. So, depending upon such situations, all these dimensions have uh, a bearing on how you need to manage the human resources. Like, for example, in a culture which is high on masculinity, maybe you need to be very, very formal. You need to maintain that, that power distance. And that's how you maintain your relationship with your employees. You reward them when they do well, and when they don't do well, maybe some kind of uh, punishment, or some kind of warning, some kind of a caution, like that. But in cultures like the Indian culture or the Arab culture, uh, you need to have more soft skills. Maybe you would, you would be more careful about the sentiments or the emotions of the people. Somebody is not working, so instead of just asking why you're not performing well, maybe you'll just ask that person uh, over a cup of tea, and just ask them everything is whether everything is fine with them. How are they doing health wise, or is there everything okay with their family, and so on. So the people feel that yes, this person, my manager, is caring, this person cares for me, and maybe they will mend their ways. So that's how it is. In many, in many, I was reading one long time back. I was reading one small piece of some very interesting piece that was about two different meetings. One was, uh, the meetings between people from you know Malaysia. Malaysian people too have a lot of influence from the Arab, and there was another person, the gentleman who had come from uh, you know some European country. Let's assume that it was Germany. So it was a complete contrast. A person coming from a very, very individualistic society and a very, very masculine culture, and meeting just the opposites, that is the Malaysian people. And the person from Germany, uh, over they were meeting over lunch, so they just had German, in generally in Germany, if you're meeting over lunch, it means that it has to be some kind of a working lunch, something not very heavy, something very light, and finish it off with a cup of tea or coffee, and just it's all about business. It's less about lunch and it's more about business. Whereas if we talk about the Arab culture or the Malaysian culture, you'll find that it will be less about business and more about food. It will be more about family, and these people, the Arab people or the Malaysian people, they'll talk about family, they'll talk about children, they'll talk about they may even ask how many wives you have, like this. So that's the kind of sometimes a very, very interesting or a humorous situation is created by when people from different cultures meet. And this is where lies the acumen, your business acumen, where you need to understand before you meet some people from other cultures. It's important that we learn a little bit about their culture, what goes and what does not go with them. All right. So moving on, one last thing: the long term and the short term orientation. Right. That it suggests that whether the focus of the cultural values is on the future or the long term, or the past and the present. Right. Some cultures, and not just this, like especially in some of the Islamic societies, they just don't talk about their discussions are more about the life in the hereafter. It's not just about this worldly life. They even talk about that what implications this business action will have on my life in the hereafter, right? So it all depends what kind of an orientation you have, whether in doing your business, whether you're looking at the short-term gains, whether you're looking at long-term partnership and relationship, right? Or even if you are looking even beyond, right? So moving further, some of the things that we will often come across, primarily there are three choices before any organization, any multinational company which is operating in a third country, right? So in one country, say for example, McDonald's, okay, for our convenience, as we all are aware of this company, we just had a discussion. I mean, you just, you know, went through the case study. So its headquarters are in the US, and it has its subsidiaries in more than 200 countries with its, uh, so so home country or the parent country is USA. Suppose it has its operations in, say Saudi Arabia. Okay, so Saudi Arabia becomes the host country, and any other country other than USA and Saudi Arabia, it would be considered as a third country, right? So there's a choice for before the company whether it wants to hire people, uh, from its home country, from its parent, country. Generally, it happens that the managerial cadre is recruited or is transferred from the parent country into the host country. The middle level managers might be hired from a third country, say from India or from Pakistan, right? And whereas the local staff, again, it may be hired, say from the host country, that is the that is Saudi Arabia. That's what we were discussing, right? So you have different categories, as it is mentioned. The parent country nationals, employees who are the citizens of the country where the multinational enterprise is headquartered. So in our example, we were talking about McDonald's, and so all the employees who are, Americans, who are the citizens of USA, they would be the parent country nationals. Host country nationals would be the local employees of the host country hired by the multinational enterprise. So in our case, all the Saudis who are being hired to work for McDonald's in Saudi Arabia, they would be the host country nationals. And the third country nationals would be all those citizens of countries other than USA and Saudi Arabia. They would be considered as the third country nationals, right? So Saudis would always be, the sons of the soil, whereas whether the parent country nationals or the third country nationals, they would also always be considered as the expats or expatriates, employees who temporarily reside and work outside their home country. Like I was working in Dubai University in Oman, so I was an expatriate in that country, right? Impatriates, employees who are foreign citizens who are assigned to work in the MNE's home country. Like for example, it might happen, and this has happened also. I mean, a lot of names, like say Indra K. Nui. I mean, she was obviously an Indian, but now she is a US citizen. So she was working as a CFO for Pepsi, like that. So I mean, some people who get promoted to such high ranks that ultimately they are required by the multinational enterprise to work in the headquarters, which are located in the parent company or the home country of the multinational enterprise, right? So this is some of the things which we will come across, especially in case of the international HR. Coming to some of the basic functions, we'll have a very, very general discussion, and I'm sure I'll be able to find some useful case studies which we'll be discussing subsequently. So you have recruitment, you have selection process. Now, thanks to internet, most of the recruitment or the invitation of applications, there are different websites, and most of the organizations are under the, you know, the careers or jobs at say, for example, if I talk about, say, Unilever, so job at Unilever's, so they always advertise the jobs on their websites. Some newspapers also bring in some information about the international openings. You have consultants who are also inviting applications from suitable candidates, and basically they're just trying to match the qualification, job competence, the qualities. So nowadays, if you remember last time we were talking about a lot of developments taking place, and most of the interviews they try to conduct through the online mode, using Skype, using IMO, using WhatsApp, using Zoom, but they have their own limitations. So in case when you have to be very, very particular about the candidates you are going to hire, then a team needs to come down to the country where they are, from where they are, seeking the employees. So, I mean, both ways it is there, or sometimes they even uh, uh, what authorize the consultants to do this entire thing, to do the screening, to do the initial interviews, and only when the final list is presented before the hiring organization, so then they can take some interviews, either the direct personal interviews uh, by flying down to that place, or using the online, depending upon the availability of time, depending upon the resources, because obviously if a team is flying down, obviously it requires time, it requires money, right? So that's also important. As far as training is concerned, you need to have the cultural training and the language, personal adjustments. Now, can you give me some examples? Yes. What kind of training would be required to be given uh, to people who would be assigned jobs in countries other than their home country? So it's already mentioned cultural training, language training, personal adjustments. Why? I mean, what is the need of such kind of a training? Yes. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I was just talking about the training. So, as it is mentioned that cultural training, language training, or training related to personal adjustment. So, if you can give me some example,
So,
what is the
for
relevant?
example, sir, so language training, for example, sir, in India, Many of the people who come to McDonald's, for example, they do not know how to interact in English, so the employees must understand Hindi or the local dialects.
Very good. Very good. Very true. The same is applicable for those people who are working in countries like, say, China, Japan, Korea, Arab countries, Turkey. Now, in many countries, you will find that there is a, there are English speaking people. So that makes the job easier. But in many countries, you will find that you won't be able to spot uh, too many people who can speak and or who can communicate in English. So this is where you will find the real difficulty. That's why you need to have the language training. That's very, very important. Similarly, some cultural training, what goes and what does not go, what are the cultural etiquettes, how to greet other people. Like, for example, let me give you a very simple example. Again, from the Arab culture. In India, if you are, you have a vehicle and you have gone to, pick up some guests, right? So the back seat is offered to the guest because that is the most comfortable seat. The seat in the rear is given to the guest, right? Because front seat is obviously shared with the driver. On one side you have the driver, on the other side you have one seat, right? As in a stark contrast, you'll find that in the Middle Eastern countries, the front seat is offered to the guest, and this I experienced myself when I did not have a car, and I used to take a taxi to my university. So every time I used to hire a taxi, the driver would always ask me to sit in the front with him, right? Only when the front seat is, if you are sharing a cab and once the front seat is covered, it has been occupied, only then the back seat would be offered to other people. So these are small things. There are etiquettes related to how to have food. There are etiquettes of sitting in the meetings. You know all these things. There are so many things which are there. How to deal with your employees. How to deal with the people. Before we wind up today's discussion, let me just recall from my initial days when I joined the Dhofar University in Oman. So one of my friends told me that the Arabs, they are very, very proud people, right? With love you can win them, you can do anything with them, but don't use any harsh words. Don't try to belittle them. They will take the offense. Don't ever call them what in we often call and there's an Arabic word ahmaq, or you fool. Don't call them fool, right? They will take a very, very they will take it very serious. So I just made a point of it, right? And even in the some of the most sometimes I did have an urge to call them like that, some of my students, but I always remembered this advice from my friend. So this is where we will call it a day. We'll meet on Monday, inshallah. All right. Thank you so much for joining.